Mark, well, one very vocal opinion when it comes to warning of the dangers of rising food prices comes right here from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Well, to take us through the risks and the best way to tackle them, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by the OECD's Secretary General, Gurria. Thank you so much for joining us. It's something that we've had to deal with for the last couple of years. Inflation, food prices. Mr. Sarkozy still seems to think that actually it's also a problem with the markets, that it's because we can trade commodities that the world's poorest go hungry. Do we need to regulate? Can we regulate? Or is this just not the truth?
The problem is much more fundamental in terms of the supply and demand, the need for more investment, for more technology. We need for agriculture to become an attractive business again, not just a subject of aid. And we need to concentrate on the developing countries. We need to deal with the questions of water, of seeds, of land itself. We need also to deal with the question of infrastructure. 30 to 40% of the production in a country like India will go lost, will get rotten. I mean, obviously, if we work on that, you got 30, 40% increase without any additional investment. It's already being produced. Aid for trade is very promising. The question of trading is, if you will, the more visible part in the financial markets. It is the tip of the iceberg. But what it reflects is the underlying imbalances of the food supply chain.
But who can actually address these imbalances? We have the G20 meeting here, and they have other things to think about. Or do we now need to make sure that these guys focus on these global imbalances in terms of food shortage, or we're going to see social unrest?
Oh, it has to be addressed by the finance ministers, but also by the agricultural ministers and by leaders and by international organizations, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the OECD. We are looking at it. Also, the World Bank is looking at it because, of course, they fight poverty around the world. So there are a number of organizations, and the question is not so difficult. It takes a lot of political will, and it takes also the cooperation, institutional building in the countries themselves, in the poorest developing countries, the most vulnerable of them all.
We saw the unrest in Egypt. We're now seeing riots in Bahrain. Is it going to spread?
Frankly, this is not because of the food, or not because of the food alone. There were very serious political reasons why these things happened. But the problem is, regardless of the political movements, there may be 100 million more that are going hungry today, adding to the 900 million that are already hungry that we know of. There's maybe about 1 billion as we speak that go hungry every night. And obviously that is ethically unacceptable, morally unacceptable, but also economically, and as we have seen, politically very dangerous.
But how can we address inflation? Even in Mexico, India, food prices are going up 15, 16, 25%. Is this because we have too much cheap cash around?
No, it has nothing to do with the fact that there is financing available. Financing is good, and financing at low price is good also. We do not have a very serious inflationary threat in the world today. I would not lose a lot of sleep about inflation. I would focus on the difficult balance between the recovery and the soft landing for the big deficits and the big debt in many of our countries.
The U.S.?
For example, they are now discussing their new budget, and of course, the recovery is still fragile, is still weak, but at the same time, they need to create more jobs. That is a big challenge, not only in the United States, but also here in Europe. In France, where we are talking now, of course, unemployment is close to 10%, as it has been in the United States for a long time. And we are seeing problems of long-term unemployment, which we hadn't seen before. In particular, the young. These are the greatly affected. The tragedy is that a financial crisis became an economic paralysis, which became an unemployment tragedy. And within the tragedy within the tragedy, if you will, is that the youth, double the average unemployment among the youth than the average population.
But how do you reconcile the fact that the U.S. needs to grow, they need to create jobs? What happens if they put, though, another stimulus package on the table? It will create even more global imbalances.
Yes, the great solution to we've run out of money. We're run out of deficit money in every single country in the world today. You're trying to bring down deficits, not increase them. You're trying to bring down debt, not increase them. So I don't think, and also the politics of stimulus packages are, I think, past. The question now is, structural. You got to go for education. You got to go for competition. You got to go for innovation, green growth. These are the things that are going to keep us going. Open the labor markets, keep them flexible, keep trading free and open, keep investment free and open, and don't jiggle and juggle the exchange rates.
Some markets are still expecting a shock and awe package from the G20. We're not going to have a major breakthrough in the next couple of days, but it won't necessarily be a disappointment.
The G20 is not about breakthroughs. The G20 is about coordination and about a gradual convergence. The G20 is about reinforcing mutually the policies of the 20 largest economies in the world, actually the 25 largest economies in the world. The G20 is about diagnosis, measuring, comparing, and then proposing public policies, and again, convergence. This is what the OECD has been doing for 50 years, and we're helping to see if we can support the effort and really move towards this convergence, which is so necessary.
But convergence on what exactly? Is it the economic? Before we can solve a problem, we need to know what we're talking about, and everybody needs to be on the same page.
Well, we were on the same page in terms of stabilizing the financial system first. Then we were on the same page in terms of the economic recovery, because we were contracting. And then we are now on the same page in terms of reducing the deficits and reducing the speed of the accumulation of the debt. But we're also on the same page about this problem, this nagging problem of the question of unemployment. And on top of that, you have still homework from the financial system, from the instabilities, some problems with some banks that still give us pause. And then you have things that happen in the markets like the price of food. And that has to be dealt with because it's the emerging moment. You know, it's the thing of the day. You have to deal with it. It's real. It happens. It's a big policy concern.
Are we going to see the US and Europe again coming together to try and force China to revalue the yuan?
The question of currencies is not off the table, and it has not been addressed, at least in full. There's been progress in the case of China, as you know. But now the problem is that many countries, and that includes China, but also India and Brazil and Korea and Mexico, are saying, I'm getting all these flows. It's not just a question of one or two countries not, playing by the rules. They say, now there's a guerre de devises, there's a forex war. This was coined by Mantega, the finance minister
is
of
Is there really
Brazil.
a war still going on?
I don't think there is a forex war in that sense, but there is high unemployment, low growth, big deficits. It's a perfect stage for protectionism, and we got to fight that type of protectionism with everything we got. Just like we fight trade protectionism, just like we fight investment protectionism, we have to fight the emergence of this manipulation of currencies in order to get an illegitimate edge at the expense of all the other competitors.
Angel Gurria, if we don't address this now, are we just putting the seeds for the next crisis?
Well, if we don't address the question of the capital controls today, and here the OECD has had for many, many years the code of liberalization of capital movements. We're going to be putting it on the table and discussing that as a contribution. It's not the solution to everything, but it's a contribution. Countries have to understand that now, if we do not pull this together, if everybody's pulling on to their own corner and everybody's trying to take advantage of everybody else, we're going to lose the enormous benefits that we have had from a rules-based trading and financial system in the last decades.
But is there a risk, because we're out of the crisis and now we're in a very slow recovery mode, that actually in 1-2 years down the line we're going to go back in a recession if the G20 doesn't take their tasks very seriously?
Well, we are in a recovery indeed, but the recovery is fragile and the recovery is vulnerable, and cooperation, as you suggest, is the one way in which we can make the recovery more sustainable and stronger, and also in which we can provide a better society. You spoke about equality. You spoke about the differences that are being created. You spoke about the poor getting poorer. That is not sustainable. And that is going to create more and more political instability. this is, economic policy is about people. Economic policy is about those youth that are unemployed and that we told them, if you stay in the university 2 or 3 years, you're going to get a better life. And now all they're getting is, sometimes unemployment benefits. So we have to do this for those people, for the most vulnerable, and for the long-term stability of the world.
Now, something that we haven't talked about, which is always in the back of our minds, of course, is periphery Europe. It's gone a little bit quiet. No one's asking for a bailout. It seems that things settled down a bit. Is just this the calm before the storm?
This is one of the dangers of the financial markets in general. The fact that the European situation could affect the overall. But let's identify that Greece was a fiscal problem. It is being addressed. It was ring-fenced with 110 billion euros. In the case of Ireland, it was a massive failure on the regulatory and the supervisory, like the whole of the crisis was about, really, originally. And that is being addressed. And now the rest of the countries are doing whatever they have to do. Spain is being absolutely exemplary in terms of the difficult measures that they are taking. So is Portugal. So I think that's going to go away. I hope, and certainly we have to keep at it.
And so investors should buy into these bonds?
Absolutely,
if
I would. Now, the trading is reflecting that in some cases there are much higher risk appraisals, but I think we are getting more stability as also Europe gets its act together. They're looking at those rules. There's more and more fiscal discipline around.
So Spanish bonds, and Portuguese bonds, all a good
yes, and also this big package of €500 billion available in order to help countries that have problems.
All right, a glimmer of hope for Europe. Angel Gurria, thank you so much. That was the Secretary General of the OECD. Well, coming